Okay, so yeah, I didn't notice earlier that I was speaking, but the other mic was actually off. It was muted. Yes, so thank you once again, everyone, for joining us online. So as our theme says, this is Voice Year 2, and today is our day as Africa. It's African Freedom Day. So as we get to learn more about how we can enhance our voice and from a digital angle as a young Africa, we're going to have one special expert who's actually going to take us through the first keynote, which will talk more around the theme. So of course, the theme has a combination of both English and Nyanja. We have voice, which is of course English, and Yatu meaning ours, so our voice. So the first speaker that we have is actually Dr. Amelia Taylor, who is a lecturer in artificial intelligence at the University of Malawi. So she teaches AI, computer intelligence, and programming modules. And in addition to this, she also supervises the Master of Science and PhD students. And Dr. Taylor is also currently conducting research in natural language processing. So this is actually AI for legal text and data mining, as well as visualization for data health. There's actually a lot more about Dr. Taylor, which we could learn more and get to interact with her as the event goes on throughout this day. But you can also find out more about her full profile on our Zambia in AI Intelligence page on Facebook. And you can also find out more about Family Development Initiative on Facebook as well. So we'll share links during the breaks that we'll have. So allow me to welcome Dr. Taylor, and over to you, Doctor.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this event. It's very exciting to be able to participate to an event in Zambia while I am in Malawi. This is what technology can really enthuse us, because wherever we are, we can have access to the same technology, the same knowledge, and hopefully we can improve our opportunities. So before I start, may I ask if you can hear me well?
Yes. Are you going to be making a presentation? Because I've added you as a co-host, so if you'll be having a PowerPoint presentation, feel free to share your screen.
Yes, I am going to share the screen in a minute.
All right, let me know.
I had a little bit of fun changing my background. And I was thinking while I did this, that technology can also, apart from being very beneficial to all of us, it can also create the illusion of progress. And sometimes measuring what technology can do for us and how we can really progress can be a tricky thing. So I'm going to start my presentation in a minute. Oh, okay. I don't think I can share. Could you? Oh, yes, sharing. I can. All right. That's right. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So the theme of my talk is why should Africans be involved in the latest technological advancements? Well, the simple reason is that technology is a key variable in economic growth. And the understanding is that it leads to increased production, lowers cost of goods and services, and makes us competitive. Whether we are involved in it or not, technology advances are happening all around us. However, it's not always easy to know what kind of technology should be implemented. And related to that, it's not easy to know, sometimes us as individuals, business people, lecturers, academics, students, what kind of technologies should be embraced and what kind of technology we should get involved in. The other question that is not so straightforward to answer is what is the role of technological advancement in long-term growth, wealth, basically, wealth creation. So our lives are better overall. Now here, just a quick parenthesis to make. I am not British, although my surname might indicate that. My accent will give it away that I'm not British. My husband is Scottish. I am originally from Romania, and I have lived a lot of my young life under communism in Romania. And recently I have lived in Africa for several years. So you might challenge me and say, maybe you are not the best person to talk to us about us African, why should we be involved in technological advancements? However, I am probably a living proof that I can operate and live in environments that are not familiar to me as a young person. Going back several years, I would have never imagined that one day I will live and work and love it in Africa. So you yourselves as young people, you might find it hard to predict what kind of path will your life be into, and what kind of technology will be around when you will be an adult. So let's do Digitization. It's true that Africans are already involved in technological advances. And here, just a few facts. It will be difficult for me to put everything on the slides, but this is a fact. Africa is already involved in many technological advances. Potentially, Africa is the largest data provider for research across the globe. However, few researchers manage to thrive locally. And I can't do justice to many different advances. For example, research in malaria, malarial drugs using indigenous knowledge and plants that have been developed in Benin, diagnosis kits that are economical, that have been developed in Kenya, and also Ghana developed a diagnosis tool for bilharzia. Yeah. However, you are going to think that there are many challenges that are faced by research and technological advancements in Africa. And these are some of the ones that are sometimes quoted. Public and private investment in research and development is low. So this covers investment from local companies and governments or public institutions. Of course, these things are changing as we speak. Access to internet. We all hear many statistics about the growth in internet coverage, internet provision. However, while access to internet is growing fast, connectivity is still a problem. And of course, another thing I haven't put on the slide is the reliability of energy, which needs to be there in order for technological advancements to happen. Another often quoted reason is that there is a lack of demand from end users, particularly from the local private sector, for the type of research. Now, health is put in brackets there because it's a very, let's say, long-standing and vibrant area of research in Africa. So the idea is that there is no demand for, research output in Africa, or very little demand. And then another one, another reason that's quoted is that there is sometimes a conflict, not necessarily conflict, I would say, but difficulty to network or negotiate cooperations that are directed towards local priorities and timelines. So these are some of the challenges that people think about. So we think about them as young researchers, and you'll be facing them as you as students go into the work life. Now, these are some of the key advantages that are given for Africa. I took this from the Asian Banker, so it will be a little bit, it's not necessarily that you have to agree with all these points, but I thought I should present them to you because these are very common. So we are told that Africa has certain key advantages that position it to be a powerful or growth-oriented continent in the next or in the current generation. So the first one that was mentioned already is that Africa has a very young population, and the median age in African countries is 10, 20 years lower than the median age in many European countries. The second one is the fastest growing population. We can't argue with this, these are facts. But I have put something in there as a kind of bigger paragraph. And this is that, you know, these two factors make the market to be slightly different in terms of dynamics. So for example, the relative importance of the existing clientele is shrinking in Africa. Why? Because there are many people you can reach. So a lot of the times attracting customers from competitions, okay, requires you to tune your proposition. So, you know, sometimes people say that, you know, to compete means to remove the other person from the market. So competition is seen as having negative connotations. But in my view, that's not the case. Competition requires cooperations. And it would be a mistake to think that in order for me to thrive technologically or in any other ways you can think of, means that I have to go alone, or I have to eliminate my competition because access to the clientele is difficult. And when we look at the dynamics, this must be true in some markets, probably. But when we look at Africa, there is a lot of potential. The other third reason that's mentioned is a rising middle class. And I'm not going to spend time on this too much. The fourth advantage is proactive mobile operators. So there's been a lot of investment in adding infrastructure capacity in terms of access to internet, fiber optics in different countries, and so on. Number 5 is rising digital literacy. Now, this is rising, but it's not, some people say it's not there yet in terms of base or solid base for a lot of technological advancements that people are proposing. But there is potential. Low physical infrastructure, again, this brings a lot of potential. Lack of legacy systems. Now, this is something that's quoted by many people with the view that Africa can leapfrog ahead, skipping some of the, let's say, development steps that we've seen in other countries. So we look at the UK as being a cautious, progressive development in terms of technological advancements. And then we look at Africa as a young country who doesn't have a lot of legacy systems and it can really jump ahead. Okay, and number 8 would be digital transition. So this means that a lot of players position themselves not in their usual markets. So we've seen that in financial services in Africa. Number 9, now bear in mind, this is taken from the Asian Banker website, is China as a key investor. And I don't think I should go into this too much, but we've seen that China has come into Africa with a lot of different investment propositions. And of course, we are yet to evaluate what is actually happening. However, China is heavily interested to be a partner of Africa. And number 10 is the use of satellite technology. Okay, and this is again an interesting area of research and work. So these are some of the key advantages that are mentioned. Now, what's the relevance to us? Well, the relevance to us would be that as researchers or people interested in technology, it's good to have some kind of understanding of what kind of market are we growing into and what kind of opportunities are there. And as I said in number 2, there are many opportunities and there's a lot of scope for cooperation. And perhaps to say, you know, events like Deep Learning Indaba and Indaba X are excellent in terms of networking. So I would encourage everyone to take advantage of that and forge relationships. In terms of industries that drive technological services, a lot of the times people talk about the first 3 that I listed there. So banking and finance, telecommunication is a big area, and healthcare. However, equally important are agriculture and manufacturing. Now, coming back to the point I've made in the previous slide, that Africa has a young population. A lot of the people say that young Africans do not go back to agriculture in their villages. However, according to research that has been done, a lot of the young people do return and have to operate in agriculture in Africa. So that's a sector that's interesting. Manufacturing also. Of course, Africa is a large continent and there are many differences across countries. So I thought of looking at some kind of report that looks at Zambia as a country. So I found the International Trade Center report of 2020, and this looks at market trends in technology services in different countries. It covers 11 countries, among which is Zambia. Of course, these are statistics and they are calculated according to certain measures, and to really understand them, it's useful to see the report. However, let's use this in our discussion. So in terms of GDP composition, services take a big chunk in Zambia, industry is second, and agriculture. And of course, we know Zambia has mining that goes into that. Although agriculture is very small, 54% of the population, according to this study, works at least part-time in the agricultural sector. And I want you to think about that because I will talk about it a little bit later. In terms of tech, technology services have grown in Zambia. So according to this report, the gross value added of technological services have been rising, although the contribution of other services has been declining. So we can see here the ICT services exports. This is exports to other industries as well, right? Internally servicing basically different other sectors. So there is a lot of scope here. So maybe coming back to the title, why should Africans be involved in technological advancements? Well, they are already involved. It all depends where should you position yourself, where do your interests lie. And there's a little table in that report that looks at some opportunities, market opportunities. I'm not an expert in Zambia, in the economy of Zambia, or into the market analysis of different trends. So this is something that you probably can put into context much better than I can. But again, as you can see, this report focuses on telecom and retail as being the driver or the place where market opportunities are for tech. Okay. Another report that I would like to briefly talk about, this was done by Siemens in 2017 and is the Africa Digitization report. And I thought it had some interesting takes for us. Now, this diagram shows the complexity in measuring or analyzing the extent to which different markets are digitalizing and what factors contribute to the digitalization process. So you can see you have macroeconomic indicators, microeconomic indicators, and so on. Now, we as individuals cannot really influence too much what's happening, at the macro level. However, it's our task to look for opportunities where they are, and understanding the environment in which we operate is important. So I would not dwell on this too much, but this report is an interesting one to read. Now, this report focuses on 4 pillars. So you have the economic maturity of a country, so the size, the growth, the sophistication of the economy. The environment, so this would be the environment in which we operate as businesses or academicians and so on. Infrastructure, and then skills and digital literacy. So in all of these segments, there are different players, and in all of these segments, there's scope for technological advancements. I will come back to this a bit later. The 3 factors that are identified in the report for influencing digital maturity are a culture of innovation, digital operations, so this would be the ability to create, analyze, and act upon data and information to drive decisions that are based on insight. Now, this links to one of the first points I made on the slide, which is that Africa provides a lot of research data, but in many cases, and cases that I am aware of, it's not, there's a lot of data that's being collected, but somewhere the process has bottlenecks, because to progress to the next level in which we analyze this data, we act upon the data, and the information from that data serves towards the decision-making process, has quite a few challenges. The third factor is digital consumers and offerings. So this would be digital solutions that now generate revenues. And again, the level of sophistication of these digital offerings varies a lot. So we've seen, for example, in the financial services, in the fintech sector, there's been a lot of changes in the kind of offering that these providers have. And the drive has been to improve more and more. Okay. I will skip this one briefly for the moment. But there are 2 things that attracted my attention from this report. One, the first recommendation that this study made was to confront digital misnomers. So the report was mentioning that sometimes it's difficult for different players to define what digitalization is. And in many cases, the businesses that they have surveyed understood digitalization in different ways. So for example, somebody might say, well, I have a computer, therefore my company or my organization is digitalized. Or I'm using this particular application to collect my data. in it. But then again, the idea of the report is that sometimes there has to be more awareness into what these terms mean. So the definition of digitalization is the use of digital technologies to change a business model and provide new revenue and value producing opportunities. And this is hard to do, and it takes time. Okay, and it's the process of moving to a digital business. So it's not sufficient just to have some skills or just to have some computers, but the whole business model needs to be transformed by this digitalization so that the products offered are value producing opportunity, provide opportunities that add value. And the other thing that attracted my attention that I wanted to mention is bridging. So the recommendation of the report was, in order for technological advancement or digitalization to happen, there is a need to bridge islands of excellence. So by this, the report meant that there are places or sectors in Africa in which things work very well. These places are islands of excellence. However, they only reach a small segment of the population, or they don't benefit the society, to a wide extent. So some of the examples given in the report are not Zambian related, but for example, in Kenya, we have the largest single wind power project in Africa. So it's a really high-tech, excellent project, but it only caters for 20% of Kenyans. Another example that's given is South Africa. The urban rail program. So this caters 62,000 commuters a day. Now, for a country like Malawi, this is a huge number. Of course, for South Africa, is not a huge number. However, what the report says is, while this is true, the urban rail program serves a lot of commuters, millions are moved by the informal and the unsophisticated transport sector. So there are islands of excellence, but there is a need to coordinate in order for real progress to happen. Islands of excellence can happen in the same organization. Some departments just function much better, and we see those things, all the time. What makes them successful? Is there a transfer of knowledge or expertise? And sometimes you have siloed data and systems that are there, but there's a need for cooperation. And I think this is a really important point, not just for Africa, but for all other places. But I think for us here, this is a really important aspect. So the report covers different sectors, and I just extracted some points here. So, for example, energy. Is there scope for technological process in the energy sector in Africa? Yes. I'm not in that area, but you might be in that area, or you are interested in that area. So the key things here is that in Africa, things would be decentralized. So because of the way the market is, I hope I'm on time, there's not going to be a centralized system. So there's a need for intelligent integration, optimum scheduling, real-time optimization. Now, all of this cover technology. There is a need to bring together independent power producers using various technologies like blockchain. And there's examples used in the book. For example, in Nigeria, there are many organizations that supply their own energy, and sometimes they sell it or they give it to communities around them. Another need is to provide field workers with various tools that can help them accomplish tasks and work remotely on the field. All of these are areas where technology can work. Artificial intelligence is there. Okay. Oops. Yeah. Transport. This is a huge thing. And we've seen a few initiatives in Africa. Some were based on the Uber model. Not all survived. you probably can think of examples right now. So the transport industry within Africa, according to the report, is even in South Africa, who is a much more developed country than other African countries, is really underdeveloped compared to other sectors. So there is the need to have various digital management systems to address certain challenges in this sector. Okay, I put some examples there. We can have a look. And as I said to you before in the other slide, there are islands of excellence. So one of the examples that's given that in Kenya, traffic lights are sometimes just decorative. Yeah, they are there, but they are not used so much. However, in every taxi or in most of the taxis you enter, you have Wi-Fi and you can pay with M-Pesa right away. Better than the way payments take place even in the UK or New York, for example. So there are areas in which we can see a lot of achievement, but some areas lack, they are behind. Finance and fintech, M-Pesa is kind of the typical example that's given in Kenya, but we also have Zoona in Zambia. Okay, and this a third report that I want to share with you, and these are available on the internet, accessible to all to see. This is quite an interesting one, and it talks about the development in mobile money in Africa. This is a 2020 report, so reasonably recent. And if you can see here, in terms of registered mobile money accounts in sub-Saharan Africa, Eastern Africa has a really big share of that. Okay, so where is the scope for technology? There's quite a lot of scope for technology. And just a few things to mention. There is now a move towards growing interoperability. So a few years before, these services did not have an API. However, most of them now are moving towards offering APIs, like Zoona's API, which was provided in 2019. And of course, this requires developers, and this requires skills in order to bring this or integrate this into viable e-commerce solutions. And then you might think, what are the gaps? As you can see, everything moves quite fast. Gaps in mobile money, improved interfaces. Of course, this is not the scope necessarily of this talk directly, but this is a growing sector in Africa, and there's a lot of need for technologists. So improved interfaces, social commerce. Okay, so this is a very hot topic now. It's not designed end-to-end, right? It still requires a lot of support for logistics and so on. Offering services that are complementary, like credit, overdraft, savings, and so on. All of these involve technology, and all of these involve specialist skills. The other aspect, again, which really needs to develop in most countries is the regulatory services, the need for stronger risk management framework. Yeah, now, if we look at some other countries, risk management is an area that's defined already, but that's not the case so much in Africa. In most cases, consultants from abroad are brought in to cover some of these gaps. So for us as people operating here, working here, living here, these are all areas with a lot of scope. Okay, so now brings me to agriculture. And I'm giving a little link at the bottom. Basically, the message of this slide is that technological advances are needed for agriculture. Okay, now it's not my job to go into theories of how development happens, industrialization, and so on. However, most researchers hold the view that agricultural development must precede industrialization. Okay, why? Because they say food production, if you have poor food productions, you have to import food. Okay, and if you import food, you take away capital from other areas. Okay, however, there is a problem. I don't know how are things in Zambia, but there is a problem. Diffusion of technology in agriculture rarely occurs. In fact, there are many statistics who show that the poor or the farmers in Africa are poorer now than they have been 30 years ago, much poorer. There is a need to invest in technological advances in agriculture. So you as the young generation or the young people, I don't know what the opportunities are there in Zambia or how the market looks like, but according to research, technological advances are needed. Agroforestry research, better crops, drought-resistant varieties, and so on, management of pests. Now, in the link that I'm giving here, there are a few articles about basically the damage, the economic damage the pests do in Africa, and how technology can be used. For example, drones or sensors that capture the incidence of various pests and so on. Okay, again, irrigation schemes. You know, weather-based crop insurance and so on, high-resolution maps. A lot of the maps in Malawi, for example, have been done many years ago. And I know this year there has been a lot of, there's been a large project that remapped Malawi, okay, to provide high-resolution maps of different kinds. Okay, and the last point for me to say is education and research. You know, what's the role of education and research? And we all agree, I hope, that education and research is very important for development. Okay. One point to make here that people often say, challenges of ICT in Africa often relate to a lack of human and financial resources. So we talked about financial resources a bit, but human resource. And the core skills that need to be developed include job-neutral digital skills, job-specific digital skills, and job-neutral soft skills, such as communication, management, analytical, critical thinking. Now, just a parenthesis to make here, at the universities in Malawi, we typically have curriculum reviews at regular intervals. And part of the curriculum review is what we call stakeholder consultations. And many times these consultations result in outcomes like you need to have, you need to change your, let's say in terms of computer science, you know, don't have a general data structure and algorithm module. You need to have Python programming because Python is now used everywhere. Now, it's challenging to put up a curriculum that can provide the skills that are necessary. But in many cases, I feel we chase the prevailing technology, and prevailing technology changes all the time. So my encouragement to us, myself, and all of us is to look at some of these job-neutral digital skills that can outlast or outlive various changes in the precise technology that's used. Okay, and the probably I should stop soon. How much time do I have?
So you've got
Okay.
like 10 minutes.
Okay, I will be on time.
All right.
This question, how do we create a university environment that is conducive to innovation and entrepreneurship? So what measures should we use to look at this? So this particular study that I'm quoting here is it's relevant to Europe, but how can we translate this into an African context? So the particular study looked at what measures can be used to measure the level in which universities create such an environment. So the universities are split in kind of two groups. Highly regarded universities, the most highly regarded university-based ecosystems. So the consensus is that we find this in countries like the UK and the US. They have been very successful in developing such an environment. The second category is highly regarded but operating in challenging environment. So that by challenging environment is meant possibly cultural factors that are not so conducive to E&I, entrepreneurship and innovation, maybe geographical isolation, lack of venture capital. So maybe a lot of universities in Africa fall under this category, really operating in challenging environment, but with opportunities. Okay, so what should we look at? So there's various input indicators that people look at. So this would be the strategy and the approach of the university. Do they have a strategy or an approach that is encouraging innovation? Process indicators. So this would be, do they participate in entrepreneurial activities? Is there a connection between universities and industry? Now, you know, what's the research quality and the reputation of the university? In Malawi, for example, it's difficult sometimes to retain talent in academia because the pay is low or lower than in the industry. And then once graduates leave, they do not come back very often. So output indicators, technology transfer. So patents, intellectual property, you know, are there sustainable companies that come out of the research of these universities and so on, and the impact that university graduates have. So why should I mention this in a talk like this? Well, probably some of you are students and members of the academia. And I think this is a question that needs to be looked into and debated. How can universities in Africa foster this kind of environment for entrepreneurship and innovation? Okay, so people measure things because we need to measure things according to some indicators, which are not perfect. But they measure percentage of alumni remaining in or returning to the ecosystem. Do they come back? Percentage of graduates working in technology-related business. So again, you'll be graduating at some point. Will you use your degree? Will you work in a technology-related business or not? And of course, this creates opportunities because, you know, you can find a gap that you can fill and you can work on something that attracts you, even if that business doesn't exist yet. Okay. Percentage of alumni engaged in starting new companies and wealth creation. Okay, so here just a question, maybe I should finish with this. Where do you fit in the technological advancement? Yeah, I've been asking myself the same question. So there are these different areas. So first, understanding as much as it's possible the environment in which we operate, what's happening in other countries. And it's not easy to do that because there is a lack of information. I think it's more pronounced in Africa, or people say it's more pronounced in Africa. So so just to give an example here, in terms of trade of agricultural goods. So there's been a big debate, why can't Africa access more markets compared to other countries? So one of the reasons that people looked at would be price, cost, the high cost of production, intensive, it's a labor intensive thing. But this is just explaining a small part of the story. So a lot of the factors that are given is actually things to do with access to information. So knowing information about different markets, pricing mechanisms, and so on. So us as technology, or people interested in technology, have a lot of scope to work and develop things. Whether that is in the agricultural sector, manufacturing, if your country has potential for manufacturing, or energy, and definitely energy is a big area, but also education. So I'm going to stop here. If there are any questions, I'm happy to take.
All right, thanks, Doc, for... Okay, go on, Joseph.
Oh, all right. Okay, thanks. Yeah, so thank you very much, Dr. Taylor, for that insightful overview of how we can, at least based as Africans, get involved in the latest technological advancements. So for questions, we had some. We had one that was actually shared by Kennedy in the chat. So he's asking how we could actually apply AI in agriculture.
Oh, okay. Well, I shared a link onto the, maybe let me, okay, I shared a link on the slide. Maybe I should go back to the slide. You can, this is just one example. Well, for example, in Malawi, there's a lot of interest in drones, using drones for various purposes, whether that is to do photographic images for different areas, or to monitor things. So you can, I think this is not just in Malawi, so you can use images of leaves or images of the plants to detect early various signs of infestations. So this would be drones that gather a lot of data. So there is scope there to do computer vision, image classification, extracting information from the images. There's also technologies that are to do with designing better crops. So as I said, I'm not an expert in this area, but there is research on designing crops that have certain features, like they are resistant to certain pests or resistant to drought. Another area would be sensors, the use of IoT. So there is, I think, a story on the website about using sensors in the field to detect how many of certain, basically insects that are seen in the field. So you count them. So when you see, let's say, a rise in the insect population of a certain kind, then you can alert. So there's a component of sensors transmitting information to the cloud, and of course, analysis of the information.
So if I can come.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to chip in. Thanks, Amelia. So it turns out, seeing as there's an interest of application of AI in agriculture, it turns out that the Department of Computer Science at the University of Zambia has actually been conducting a number of studies or research. So for instance, I think beginning some 2 years ago, there's been a series of projects that have been focused on trying to figure out how we can automatically detect fall armyworms right? I'll try and see if I can edit my slides so that I include details of these projects. In fact, we've had so far, I think, a total of 2 master's dissertations that have been spun off of that particular focus area. And it turns out recently I'm part of a team of individuals that are actually working with the Zambia Meteorological Department. And what we are doing is we're working towards building classification models that are aimed at automatically predicting seasonal rainfall, right? So currently, ZMD has a manual-like process which they use to predict whether or not it's going to rain tomorrow, or the relative number of millimeters associated with the rainfall that's going to occur. But I'll talk more about that during my talk. I just thought I would complement what Amelia mentioned about infestation. Thank you.
No, thank you for that.
All right, thank you very much for that. So just coming back to the other question in the chat. So in terms of, so there's a question as to whether we're going to share the slides. So we'll make arrangements and compile everything, then we can get to share that. And we had another question from Michael, as in which sector would you advise someone to do a project as well as have the potential likelihood of growing more than one sector? Okay, I don't fully get the question, but I think it's maybe like in which sector is it digitization most viable?
Well, there are sectors where that requires a lot of capital, or they are harder to enter. So for example, in the financial sector, this is a typical one which you see big players. So I think to break, for example, to come up with a viable product in terms of financial services requires a lot of investment, and the break-even point is you know, it's you reach it in several years. Now, I think there's lots of scope for improvement. One thing I feel is that sometimes the effort that goes into developing something that is lasting requires a lot of background work. So for example, the example you gave about the weather stations and the way they collect the data, and perhaps this gap in which you have, you know, maybe the data is not clean, or maybe there are years of gaps in which data has not been collected, and so on. And how can we come with a simulation and trying to improve that particular area? Before you get to exciting results, you need to do a lot of the work that is more, you know, the donkey work. Okay, it doesn't look exciting. But I feel that sometimes the pressure that is put on people is to come up with something really exciting. So I see that with the students' projects, when they do, whether that's a 4th-year project or a master's project, the objectives are way too ambitious, you know, something that you can't really achieve in 1 year, and certainly not as a one person. So the tricky bit is to, you see, the question that you've raised also indicates that there's a lack of information. It's not easy to detect or define the gap. And not only that, it's not easy to define the gap, because you need to understand how things work and where there is a problem. But it's also hard to know what you can do about the problem. And sometimes you can feel let's say that you want to do some, you know, it takes years in order to develop something that's lasting. It takes years. So I think you need to make a decision in terms of what's your interest, which area is the one that interests you, and then you need to make a time commitment. It's not something you know you can use. If this is an undergraduate project, you can use it as an opportunity to learn. So maybe something will come out of it, maybe not. So let me give you this example. myself as an undergraduate student many years ago, 1997, I worked on a project to do with natural language processing. It was developing an interface in natural language processing. And of course, at that time, I didn't understand everything fully. I was not a fully fledged researcher. It was just a final year project. But it caused me to be interested in it and to think about it more and to develop certain skills that you can use in the same field, or you can transfer them to another field. So I would say, in terms of the gap, it's for you to identify it, because there is scope in pretty much all these sectors. So energy, as I said, transport, and transport is said to be one of them. Energy, again, it's high entry kind of field. You need equipment. You're talking about more expensive technology. If you want to experiment with data, will you have access to that data? So I think maybe do a checklist for various areas you're interested in, and ask yourself these questions. If I want to do the research in this area, who are the players? Who do I need to approach? Is there scope for me to partner? Will I have access to the data? Will it be expensive to conduct this research? And so on. In terms of, I can't see the question, so that's the only problem. I see people coming. So I wouldn't have a clear answer for you. Yeah, so I can only tell you from my experience. Let's say natural language processing. There's a lot of interest in African languages at the moment. There's been some funding, Zindi competitions in developing data sets for different languages, machine learning and machine translation. But you see, this kind of areas require years of research. You can't do it in 1 year. And sometimes people can be trapped in that scenario where you make yourself, you put burdens on yourself. You want to achieve something quick. And of course, sometimes you have to, because maybe you apply for funding, right? But in many cases, it needs to be a commitment that's a bit longer. And this is why I've put the slides about academia, fostering research and development, and the need for public and private investment in that, cooperation between academia and industry, because that's the only way in which real development can happen, not through simple, short grants that are given by donors, outside donors. It has to come from the inside. So for you as a young researcher, I don't think you should worry too much. Whatever area you choose at the moment, there's a lot of scope for development.
Thank you very much, Doctor. That's very insightful. And of course, you've really highlighted on how being self-reliant actually helps us develop as a nation, as opposed to looking outwards for solutions. So we could have gone through all the questions with time, but looking at the limitation of time, we had we're supposed to have the next lined up activity, which should be starting shortly. We're supposed to start at 9:45. Well, I think at least with the two questions that you've tackled, I feel the audience has some of their doubts as well cleared where they had questions. Thank you very much for the insight, and also highlighting in terms of how we, of course, need to make sure that we use relevant and valuable metrics in measuring our growth as digitizing. So it's not just about, of course, getting equipment, technological equipment, but then just trying to see how this translates into revenue and adds value to the various businesses. That's, of course, the only way that we then would actually make a more impactful involvement of technology in the various industries that we're involved in. Thank you very much once more. I don't know if you have maybe like any final words, keywords that you'd like to leave us with, or maybe even a quote that you find most interesting that you might want us to always remember as we move on from this Indaba?
What I can do is I will share this presentation and my email address. So maybe the questions that I haven't managed to address, I can try and answer them there. I think the advice to people, I mean, the advice I could give is be courageous and be confident, because there is scope out there for you. You don't need to always be in competition. And sometimes providing opportunities for other people, provide opportunities for yourself, and look for the long term. It's hard to do that because things are moving so fast. But if we can try to look for the long term solution and keep our heads down, work hard, and then we will reap the benefit. And honest research and honest work will always provide benefits to us in the long term. Might not be in the short term, but in the long term. So maybe that's something I could say.
All right. No, thank you very much, Doctor. So yeah, we'll wait. So we'll get to share the slides and content once you once you make it available. So moving on, so we have a number of